Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Great River Arts Open Mic Night for August 1st, 2019. Welcome. Really glad to have you all here tonight. Thank you. It's a sweltering evening out there in Little Falls, Minnesota. There's all kinds of great activities happening tonight, including Open Mic Night. We've only got a couple of folks on the bill tonight, so they have the spotlight to themselves. So I want to just first of all mention, if there's anybody else that hasn't signed up that wants to perform, there is a sign-up sheet, not at the front desk like my notes say, but right here. I will have it at this table. If you decide that you want to get up, steel your courage up, please come on over and sign up. So with that, I will introduce myself. My name is Michael Burr. I've performed at Open Mic Night many times over the years. I've only emceed once several years ago, so this is my first time emceeing in a long time. I'm taking over for the great Matt Duckett, who as of last week took off with his lovely wife and daughter and moved out to California to go to graduate school and to continue to refine his already amazing painting talent. So we are missing him already, and as a result, I'm here. So I'm going to do my best, but I cannot imitate the inimitable Matt Duckett. So just a quick note about Open Mic Night. I meant to look this up, and I still need to do that, exactly how long Great River Arts Open Mic Night's been going. It's several years now. I want to say we're probably in the 5th year. I remember being involved with it in the first couple of years, and when Jason Schomer was our MC here, and Sam Bruno after that, and Matt Duckett since then, and tonight you've got me. So I'm not going to be performing tonight. I'm just going to try to run the show along. So I just wanted to mention that this activity, along with everything else that you see here, is funded in part, in large part that is, by the Five Wings Art Council and by the Minnesota Legacy Funds that have been allocated for arts and cultural value in this state, and we certainly do appreciate their support. So I hope you will give them your thanks if you ever have a chance to do that. So I think that's probably my main opening notes here. I think what we'd like to do is start with our first act, and that is James Steinle, and he's got a reading for us from some original work he's been writing, biographical, as I understand, about his early years. So James, come on up. Thank you.
Now, what I want to say is, how many of you out there, raise your hands if you know who Shem, Ham, and Japheth is? Oh, we got a couple out there, and 3, okay. Well, they were the sons of Noah that survived the flood. So they had their children. What were those children? Cousins to each other, right? Now you go a maximum of 250 generations back. That's assuming 20 years for every generation, which is probably really narrow. But we're cousins just going back 250 generations. So, hey, I'm your cousin, whether you're for good or for bad. So, so I thought with that introduction, I would just read a little bit about what it was like for me growing up in the late 40s and early 50s. And I'll just say that when I was about 3 or 4, my parents moved to Lamberton, Minnesota, which is the southwest corner of Minnesota. And they rented a small apartment in a brick building known as Urkel's Apartments. My brother John, older than me by just over 7 years, was of course my hero. My sister Beverly was really a stranger to me because she was 18 years my senior, and at an age of almost 19 was already married and moved out of the home. So I didn't even know her. I didn't even know I had a sister for a long time. Urkel's Apartments were fun for a little kid. The ceilings were quite tall. The closets, and the closet in the boys' bedroom had an open space a couple feet above it, where I was able to climb up above it and enjoy being there. And just down the street then was a beautiful horse chestnut tree. And for we kids around there, we young kids, each year with the spiky horse chestnuts could be opened by revealing the rich, dark, reddish color of the nut. And my fingers would slide pleasingly around and pass over the very smooth skin. we kids would always keep a few in our pockets as though they were precious treasures. I think I don't know how many horse chestnut trees are around here anymore, but not too many, I don't think. Across the street lived an older couple. In their yard were 2 pear trees, which we kids loved to climb and pick 1 or 2 delicious yellow ripe fruit. And how good they tasted. I kind of recall we had to be a little careful about taking too many liberties with eating all their pears, of course. And one day, I was on my tricycle across the street from the Urkel's apartment when I saw my mother walking quickly away from me, heading to downtown. She must have been almost a half a block away when I spotted her. My thoughts were, my mother is leaving me! So, crying and pedaling as fast as my legs would take me, I took off after her. She would not even turn around. It was as though she could not even hear me. All of a sudden, there was my mother behind me, running as fast as she could to catch up with me. The woman I had been chasing had a coat on just like the one my mother wore and looked just like her, even her hair. What are these memories that come back, and you think about these things. I just thought, who cares about it? But yeah, I do. Kindergarten was in a large brick grade school about 7 to 8 blocks away. One of my most vivid memories from that time was that I was standing in front of the door that opened into the classroom. I don't recall if I had walked to school. My ear thing is here squeaking on me, so I'll turn that down. But I don't recall if I had walked to school or if my dad had brought me. I entered the school and walked down the worn oak board steps into the basement. The first door on the right was where I was supposed to go in. So I reached up to turn the big knob, and I couldn't turn it. So I was too shy to knock, so I walked all the way home. And then my dad had to bring me back, to open the door for me, and that was my first day being late for class. Just those things that just remain in your memory. My mother taught me a great lesson in life one day. A couple other young friends of myself had found a small cast iron 3-legged kettle. What to do with it? Why, of course, let's build a fire with it. We were in the alley across the street where we scraped up a kettle full of dried leaves. Now, how were we going to light it? I remembered some farmer matches laying on my mother's dresser in their bedroom. Hurrying across the street and into the apartment where my mother was, I tried to be as nonchalant as I could be. I worked my way into her bedroom and pocketed a match, then headed out back to my friends. We soon had a pot of fire and a large volume of smoke proceeding forth from it. There was Mother striding purposefully across the street with a stern look on her face. She grabbed my hand, taking me back across the street, but not to the apartment. She was headed to the outhouse at the back of the property. Afterwards, so quickly my pants were down and the licking was in progress. Afterwards, she took my hand and we headed back to the apartment, with me pretending to skip merrily along as though nothing was wrong. I didn't want my friends to think that anything had happened, but from that time on, I knew it was wrong to steal. And also that mothers have eyes in the back of their heads. That lesson has stayed with me all my life. Thank you, Mom. I don't remember if I lived in Lamberton at the time or in close by Revere, which is 5 miles to the west of Lamberton. But vivid is the picture when I was in the Lamberton Theater waiting for the feature show to come on and seeing a commercial for a John Deere tractor. The green and yellow tractor with its distinctive put-put-putting sound would come over a small hill, showing how well it was working in a young field of green corn. That is why we see so many commercials on radio, television, and the movies. They do impact our lives. I've always loved the sound and look of the John Deere tractor since watching that commercial when I was so young. Ever heard of bread and mustard plasters? When nothing else would work, this is what my mother would use on me when sick. She would mix up some torn bread and mustard, probably adding a little water also, I would think. Then heating up this concentrated mass of goo, she would place it right on my chest. Wow, was it hot. If anything could loosen up a chest, this is it. It has been a rare time, but I have used that home formula on myself since that time and passed the information on to others. This experience may well have been the reason why in my later years I have reached into how to heal oneself using more natural methods. Making my own natural remedies has proven effective in treating all kinds of ailments and problems. But we moved to Revere, Minnesota then, in southwest Minnesota again. I believe it was 1951 when I was 8 that Dad and Mom made a move to Revere, Minnesota, 5 miles west of Lamberton, only a mile or so west of the Steinle homestead, established in 1872 by my dad's father. My folks had bought a large home that had many rooms, and the plan was to make it a rest home. Of course, one of the first things any young boy would do is explore all the nooks and crannies. There was a little cubicle just before the entrance going up into the attic. There was a large old rolled up map from a school, probably 4 or 5 feet in width by the same in length. There was an old scroll type of toy that could be turned by a knob and a new scene would appear. Also a few other old dusty things that the details of which I do not come to mind. But such treasure for little boys. Most people would not think about that space as a place to hide in, but for a young fellow it was a perfect place to hide. The attic was a large and wondrous place with windows on all 4 sides. When storms would come from the southwest, I would sometimes go up into the attic, lay on the floor, and watch the rain and the wind approach across the fields, sometimes with birds flying desperately ahead as they tried to get away. You know, some of those storms are pretty big storms, so the birds would sometimes really be flying out of there. In the attic was an old large working radio that had various bandwidths. My sister Beverly and her husband Don's eldest son, Michael Scoville, was only about 2 1/4 years my junior. He and I were quite constant companions and did many things together. Mike and I took a long copper wire and stringing it up across the attic, hooked it up to the radio. It was so fun to hear foreign languages or to hear the shortwave of what we took to be planes or ships. Mike and I started a club up in the attic which we named the White Owl Club. I can't remember many details about the club or what its purpose was anymore, but for kids who needs a purpose. I do remember club dues were kept in a cigar box, which I believe was the origin of the name of our club. And a few years ago, I came across at a garage sale a White Owl cigar box. So I took it down yesterday, was it yesterday, Pat, or was it 2 days ago? Met my nephew in St. Cloud and his son, and I showed him that white cigar box, which is basically the same type of one that we had our club dues in. So just fun to go over those old ways, you know. I was happy I was older than my nephew, Mike, as he could have a temper. I remember there were a number of times when he wanted to hit me, and I'd put my hand on his head and just hold him off, and he'd just keep swinging and swinging his arms. Couldn't get to me. Hands pumping like a windmill. I recall it was funny to me at the time. Of course, it's possible it was me that might have started the fight just to get him mad. Thankfully, at this time in life, I do not recall who might have been at fault. However, we too did have some good times growing up together. I will talk more about that later, and that'll be at another time. But another of my earliest, most wonderful memories is one that I have no trouble reliving in my mind today, that of being at my mother's oldest sister's farm home. Uncle Henry and Aunt Lillian Hamilton had a black wood cook stove. That was the first thing you saw as you walked into the home and into their kitchen. Immediately, the aroma of burning corn cobs wafted into my nostrils, embedding itself into my pleasure memory forever. The round table in their small kitchen was covered by a red and white checkerboard oilcloth, while on the wall next to the outside door was a tin container of farmer matches. A kerosene lamp provided light. Our doorway out of the kitchen led upstairs to another room. And oh, were the stairs narrow, going rapidly upwards. Some things just as simple as that can impact us so much, embed themselves into our memory. The only grandparent that was still alive when I was born in 1943 and was there in my youth was my mother's father, Conrad Carlson. For a number of years, I did not even realize I had a grandfather, as there was no mention of him as I recall. When I first met him in Westbrook, Minnesota, was when my mother stopped by a tiny shack and checked in on him. He was white-haired and gave us a smile. I believe he was smoking a pipe. My mother made small talk with him while I just watched. I later learned that he was kind of considered a black sheep of the family, which was tied in with drinking and gambling. My sister Beverly told me Conrad traveled to Sweden one time to pick up his wife Emma's inheritance and came home with no money left. A few years after my first visit, he came to live out the remaining years of his life in my parents' nursing home in Revere. I never did have a grandpa-grandson relationship with him, which I regret, even though he may have been a scoundrel. Sometimes we're all scoundrels. In southwest Minnesota, back in those days, there were thousands of jackrabbits running all over the fields. Hunting them was a great sport, whether with .22 rifles or shotguns. We could sell them to the mink farms. I recall at least one time being involved in a community hunt where men from all around the area would drive out to a certain rabbit-infested section. They surrounded the square mile, parking all around the 4-mile stretch of gravel road. They only carried a club of whatever type, as this was not the situation that would call for a firearm. Then at a certain agreed time, everyone started moving into the section, scaring up jackrabbits, which of course would then take off away from the line. Soon the line started converging and the rabbits were driven into a smaller and smaller area. When a rabbit tried to break through the line of people, they would find themselves on the business end of the club. As I recall, hundreds of rabbits could be eliminated in this manner. It may seem cruel to do it that way, but these were times when it was the farmer against the hungry and overly plenteous rabbits. My dad instilled in my brother John, who was 7 years older, and myself a love of fishing, hunting, and being outdoors. With fond memories, I recall the early spring tradition of going into the Revere lumberyard and looking diligently over the long, skinny bamboo poles us kids would be using that year for bullhead fishing. My dad would often head out to my favorite lake, Chautauqua, where we would put on the worms we had dug up at home on the Steinle farm homestead. Chautauqua was a large body of water, though normally dirty looking. Dad had some place where he would drive through a large grove of fully grown elm trees until we could get to a place where we could walk down to the water's edge. Sometimes the water was just too cold for them to bite very much in the early spring. But when the water warmed up enough, watch out. Soon our gunny sack would be holding 30 to 60 good-sized bullheads. I clearly remember and can instantly bring to mind the day when something spectacular happened. The water was just calm, getting late in the afternoon, and as smooth as could be. I was watching out over the water. Suddenly, as far as I could see across the lake, fish jumped out of the water all at the same instant. I've never seen anything like that before, nor since. And what may have caused that to happen, I don't know, but I wish I did. A special treat was when Dad would take my brother John and I, and sometimes my nephew Mike when he was around, up to Lobster Lake, close to Alexandria, Minnesota. We would go up on a weekend for 2 days. Northern pike and bass were our pursuits. We would, or I should say Dad, rent a wooden boat, put on a small outboard motor, and out we would head for a glorious day of fishing. We had a certain spot on the west end of the lake, just at a certain depth, we liked to fish over. There we would sit, waiting for that exciting moment when the large bobber would suddenly go under the clear blue-green water. It was always a big decision as just how long to let the fish have the bait before we would set the hook. Too early, and we might not get it. too long, and it might be too late. How fun fishing was, until, of course, I had to pee. One time, no one else wanted to go back to land. And they said, well, just go over the side of the boat. As a young little fellow, have you ever tried to do that? Well, it can be harder than it seems. I remember trying to get close to the edge of the boat without feeling like I'm going to fall out. And then to realize not everything went into the lake. How embarrassing to wet my pants. There are some pitfalls in going fishing. Speaking of Lake Chautauqua, it reminds me of wonderful extended family gatherings we had there. Warm are my memories of my family driving to the area and arriving at a green, grassy park area and seeing all the other vehicles that our aunts, our uncles and aunts and nieces and nephews and cousins had arrived in. Most of these type of gatherings were with my mother's Carlson side of the family. She came from a large family of 8 long-lived siblings. And there were 5 still living at the time of this writing in 2005. Lillian, 101, Caesar, 98, Pearl, 97, Opal, 95, and my Uncle Bud, 91. My mother, Verna, died a month shy of 95, 5 years ago. Well, that's actually about 19 years ago now. She was preceded by Florence and Harold, who also lived into their elder years. And we children were able to run and play among the large trees while the adults spread the tablecloths on the picnic tables and blankets on the ground to sit upon. Abundant food was set out: chicken, potato salads, pickles, cookies, and pies, and oh so much more. Some of that oh so much more was the Scandinavian dish called lutefisk that seemed to show up at any Carlson family gathering. It seems that most loved the smelly, slimy, gelatinous cod that was made by soaking the fish in lye. I can never learn to like that throwback to ancient times of preservation. I have tried occasionally over the years, but have never developed a taste for it. But what a joy for a young child family gatherings are. It is a time to establish strong bonds of love and friendship that brings enrichment, comfort, and joy to us throughout our lives. And I always promote, for young people, attend family gatherings. Do it. You'll never regret it. So until another time, we'll leave it at that.
So we've got another performer here. Lindsey Rose is a guitar player, and this is your first time on stage here. Is that right, Lindsey?
Never. First time.
All right, great. Well, so welcome to Open Mic Night. She brought a high-paid hired drummer to come here and back her up with some beats. So they're going to get a little bit set up here. We're going to move the drum kit forward. So it's just going to be a few minutes. If you would talk amongst yourselves, we'll be all set up in a minute. All right, without further ado, Lindsey Rose, it's your turn.
getting dark, too dark to see. Feels like I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, 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 knocking on heaven's door. Mama put my gun to the ground. I can't shoot them anymore. That cold black cloud is coming down. Feels like I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, 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 knocking on heaven's door. Ooh.